How we doing, everybody? Today we're recapping an American martial arts action film, Bloodsport. Spoilers ahead. What would you do if you were forced to fight and compete in an underground fully contact martial arts tournament where defeat can oftentimes mean death?
I heard you can get killed at that kumite.
Well, when you're Jean-Claude Van Damme, this incredibly dangerous predicament could be your bread and butter. The movie introduces us to the busy city of Hong Kong and the preparations some people are making for a tournament called the Kumite. A man smashes through ice, another through wood, and another's destroying a body bag, all in preparation for the tournament. Our protagonist, a soldier named Frank Dux, is also training when a junior officer informs him that a superior officer wants to see him. They don't want him to go to the tournament.
Colonel Cook would like to see you before you leave on furlough.
However, Frank makes an escape while the soldier's waiting. Frank goes to Shidoshi's house and meets his wife. While he's waiting, he has a flashback. Years ago, when he was a kid, he broke into Shidoshi's house and got caught trying to steal their katana by Shidoshi and his son, Shingo. When Shidoshi tried to intimidate him, he didn't even flinch, so he decided to teach him martial science. Shidoshi convinces Frank's parents and they allow him to train with him and his son. But the training actually turns Frank into a professional punching bag. He isn't taught anything by Shidoshi, so he decides to quit. Frank and Shingo become friends after he stops him from getting bullied at school. He tells Frank that he plans to make his father proud by participating in the Kumite someday. However, years later, Shingo gets murdered, and a grieving Shidoshi decides to quit training, but Frank convinces the old man to train him.
You are not Japanese. You are not a Tanaka.
Well, they begin training, and Frank gets his ass whooped. A little. Nah, I'm just kidding. Frank gets a celestial ass whooping. He beats him in every possible way until he begins to get the hang of things. With time, he gets better, and he's able to do all the cool stuff that impresses both him and his wife. But training gets worse for Frank. Shidoshi intensifies the beatings and spreads him like a Thanksgiving turkey between two trees using nothing but ropes. But Frank overcomes the challenge, and in that moment, Shidoshi decides that he's ready. He anoints him and gifts him the katana. Back to the present, Shidoshi's very sick when Frank meets him. He tells him that he's going to go to Hong Kong to participate in the Kumite, and Shidoshi gives him his blessings.
I'm going to Hong Kong.
Before we go on, like the video, smash the subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell to join our expendable squad. Now in Hong Kong, Frank meets another potential rival, an obnoxious fighter named Jackson who flirts with a woman on the bus. Meanwhile, a journalist named Janice questions some men at a hotel about the Kumite, but they won't tell her a thing. Frank meets Jackson at the hotel and they play Taekwondo, an arcade game. Frank beats him thrice, which impresses Jackson and they become friends. Now back in the US, some government officials question Shidoshi's wife about Frank's whereabouts, but she tells him that she doesn't know where he is. So now Frank and Jackson meet up with a shifty fellow named Mr. Lin. He informs them that he was sent by the Kumite to show them around, and warns them that fighting outside the arena will lead to disqualification. He also tells them about the mafia named Triad that permitted the tournament to be held in Hong Kong. They go through some dark alleys before they eventually reach the Kumite.
This is the biggest kumite ever.
Now the Kumite is teeming with people, training and watching. Mr. Lin instructs them to show their invitation and prove that they can fight. When Frank shows his invitation, the officials find it hard to believe that Tanaka was his Shidoshi, and they'll tell him to prove it by showing them his Din Mak, also known as Death Touch. Frank approaches a stack of bricks and tells Mr. Lin to choose which one he should break.
Death touch.
Lin chooses the brick on top, but the officials choose the one at the bottom. Everyone gathers to watch him perform, and Frank doesn't disappoint. He shatters that brick effortlessly, and they accept his invitation. But some of the fighters, including a guy named Chung Lee, aren't impressed. Meanwhile, the US government officials from before have traveled to Hong Kong to stop Frank from fighting in the Kumite. Hong Kong officer named Chen reluctantly agrees to help. Frank returns just in time to stop another fighter named Hussein, but we'll call him Goldtooth Hussein, from assaulting Janice. Things get heated until Frank decides to gamble with Goldtooth over Janice.
You can't do this.
Frank has to take a coin from his hand before he can close it. He does, wins the bet, and saves Janice from Goldtooth Hussein. Later, they talk about the Kumite. Janice wants to know why he joined the fight and everything else about the Kumite, but he refuses to tell her. Eventually, he agrees on one condition, if she agrees to go out to dinner with him. So the next day, Jackson stumbles on Frank doing a split in deep meditation. He's concerned that Frank might be reducing his chances of reproduction in the future, and he also informs him that the transport to the Kumite tournament is ready.
Are you ready?
Frank is ready. It's the first day of the tournament, and the head gives a quick history lesson of the event. It was created hundreds of years ago by the Black Dragon Society, who tested the fighting skills of their members in a full contact match. People begin to place bets in a fever rush. There are 3 ways to win: knock your opponent out, make him surrender, or throw them off the stage. Jackson says it's a piece of cake. The first fight is between one dude who looks like the love child of Buzz Lightyear and Muhammad Ali, and the other one with a cute red ribbon on his waist. Buzz Ali, whose real name is Susan Paredes, easily dominates the fight and knocks Red Ribbon Guy off the stage. The next fight is between Jackson and some CrossFit-looking dude. Well, Jackson's cocky. The CrossFit guy begins to punch and kick Jackson until the big guy bleeds, so Jackson ends his commission with one punch. Then, in a fit of passion, he turns his aggression on Chong Li in the stands.
Oh, funny. Real funny.
Who he promises to kill. Oh boy, I'd like to see where this is going. You gotta pity this janitor. And the next fight is between Chong Li and some other dude who we shouldn't even bother about because we learned from Frank that not only is Chong Li the current champ, he's also famously brutal. He once KO'd someone to death and then stood over his body as his soul took the exit. Now this is who Jackson wants to kill. Well, Chong Li knocks his opponent out in seconds and sets a new world record without even trying. And our next fight is between Frank and guess who? Yup, our boy, Goldtooth Hussein. He launches for Frank, but Frank smacks the ethnicity from his body to the floor. And then Frank warns him to stay down, to which he agrees. When Frank isn't looking, he creeps up from behind, but Frank knocks the gold from his teeth, so he's just Hussein now. Our favorite janitor goes about the Lord's business. The next couple of fights are just weird, and maybe a little inappropriate because what is this? Why is that black man? You know what? Never mind. Jackson makes us proud. Chong Li does his thing. And do we even have to bother about Frank?
Oh, yeah!
Meanwhile, the US government officials are testing out that local cuisine, like shameless tourists, when Officer Chen meets them and tells him where Frank is staying. So Frank and Jackson are chilling in the lobby when the officials approach him. Jackson comes to Frank's defense, but they ignore him, and each draw out a 50,000-volt taser that they're not afraid to use on him. He's been told that he has to abandon the tournament and return to the US. Not so fast. Jackson takes both officers down, giving Frank enough time to make an escape. They begin a ridiculous chase around the streets of Hong Kong. Frank has some fun taking them in circles until they reach a line of canoes that bridge a stream where Frank effortlessly crosses. However, the officers fall in. Later that night, Frank has spilled every secret of the Kumite to Janice over dinner. Now she wants to get in, but Frank tells her that no press members are allowed into the competition. She gives him a subtle threat, flirts a little, and convinces him to break some rules.
Well, I'd really like you to help me get into the Kumite.
So the next morning, Frank and Janice had done the monkey business, and thankfully, Frank insists that he can't help her get in. It's a line that he can't cross. And she says that she understands, but I don't think she does. Now, Mr. Lin is hysterical when Frank arrives at the tournament because he'd been looking for him. Jackson tries to perform the brick trick but ends up improvising. Meanwhile, guess who got into the event with a fancy dress? Janice. And these next round of fights are incredibly intense. Well, not for Frank. He defeats another fighter with only his legs. Buzz Ali matches up with Chong Li and knocks some jabs into Li that puts a smile on his face.
What the hell are you talking about?
And then Chung quits playing, disciplines Buzz, and destroys his leg. You have to pity the guy they bring to Chong Li and Frank because they make it look too easy. They knock all their opponents onto the ground and out of the competition. The next opponent Frank meets looks like trouble. He makes a big demonstration before they fight. And then Frank knocks him out with 3 moves. Our creepy crawly black fighter who's somehow still in this competition has the life literally squeezed out of him, and Chong Li colonizes a Caucasian fighter into submission. Now Frank's next opponent proves to be a little difficult to handle, so he pulls off his shirt. But that doesn't work. The fighter hurts his leg and he tries to break his hand before trying to squeeze the life out of the man. But Frank uses his head to knock him off. And then he pressure cooks the man's abdomen with his fists. And when he refuses to go down, he factory resets the man's gonads. Janice is impressed, and the crowd chants his name. Now the next fight is between Jackson and Chung Lee. Frank's a little worried for Jackson. He tells him to go for his gut and to stay away from his right leg. But Jackson tells him that he has it under control, and he should stop sounding like his mother. Turns out Jackson was right. He has it under control, and with some powerful moves, he knocks Chung Lee to the ground. But instead of finishing him off, Jackson begins to celebrate. Well, Chung Lee recovers and beats Jackson to a pulp before cracking his skull on the floor. Frank is horrified. Chung snatches Jackson's headband and mocks Frank. And now the two are staring intensely at each other. There will be blood. Back in the hospital, it turns out Jackson has a skull as thick as concrete, so he'll be fine. Frank promises to avenge his defeat, but Janice, who has caught feelings for Frank, gets pissed that Frank might suffer the same fate if he keeps fighting.
Frank, I don't want to see you get hurt.
Well, Frank tries to make her understand, but she doesn't. Now, Mr. Lin grabs Frank and reminds him to stay focused, telling him don't do it for Tanaka, don't do it for Jackson, do it for yourself. Meanwhile, Janice overreacts. She snitches on the entire Kumai tournament to Officer Chen. And when Chen asks her why she's ratting out the establishment, she says she's doing it for her friend. When asked who's the friend, she says Frank ducks. Oh well, so on his way home, Chung Lee lives rent-free in Frank's mind. He can't stop thinking about the fight, Jackson, and Mr. Tanaka. Eventually, he trains to ease the tension. Now it's the final day of the Kumite, but the pesky US officers are back again. And this time they're with Officer Chen. Frank routinely defeats all Officer Chen's subordinates and escapes just as Janice appears out of thin air. The younger US officer is tired, but the older one has a plan. Janice follows him. At the Kumai tournament, they're done waiting for Frank when he appears.
I wish everyone would just calm down. I said he'll be here.
Some people put their life savings on this fight, so the air is pretty tense. Meanwhile, the US officers have taken a seat in the audience with Janice. The first fight is between Frank and a brutal fighter. The guy's first move is trickery, and he knocks out the daylight savings from Frank's eyes. But when he gets up, he wreaks vengeance on the brutal fighter's lineage. They have this kicking fest that ends with Frank knocking the man's head off balance. Well, Frank wins. And he notices Janice and becomes happy. Now in the next fight, Chong faces the first real challenge in a while. But even this fighter stands no chance, and after some explosive moves, Lee kills this fighter. The room falls silent, and Chong turns to Frank. "You are next," he says. The final match is about to begin. Lee encourages Frank. People placing bets. Stage prepared. Frank's getting ready and the janitor is sneaking something into Lee's shorts. Well, he plans to cheat. On Lee's leg, we see Jackson's headband. Before they begin, Chung Lee tells him he'll break him like how he broke Jackson, showing him the headband. Frank strikes first and quickly, knocking some awareness into Lee. Then Frank knocks out that awareness with his legs not once or twice. But Chung strikes back with his fist. At first it looks bad for Frank, but he responds with a flying kick that lingers into Lee's skull. Then he follows up with an impossible kick, a couple of jabs, evenly distributed punches, and knockout kick to the chin. So Chung cheats and throws some white powder on his face. Now Frank's vision's blurred. And things tip in Lee's favor. He's punching and kicking Frank to the ground. Janice is near tears. Frustrated, Frank's remembering his training and proceeds to beat the hell out of Chung Lee. Kick after kick after kick until Lee surrenders. Now, Frank's won the Kumai tournament. He's awarded a sword, and Janice and the US officers cheer on. Later on, Janice and Frank are with Jackson in the hospital and they tell him everything. He drinks to Frank's victory, and Frank gives him his headband and they share a moment of friendship. Now the officers are waiting for Frank at the airport, but they don't realize he's already in the plane. After a candid moment, Frank notices Janice and they bow. You might already know this, but this film was built on lies. As the movie ends, they mention some insane feats by the real Frank Dux. Undefeated in 329 matches in a course of 5 years. Can you believe that? Still a fun movie to watch. And this was our review of Bloodsport, produced by Canon Films and featuring Jean-Claude Van Damme as Frank Dux, Donald Gibb as Jackson, and Leah Ares as Janice. Released in 1988 and directed by Newt Arnold.